Peter and others have been fishing all night, and they've come up with empty nets. The risen Lord, unidentified on the shore, says to them, "Children, you have no fish, have you?" And they answer him, "No." He says to them, "Cast the net to the right side of the boat, the opposite side, the other side, and you'll find some." So they cast it. And now they are hardly able to haul it all in because there were so many fish. That question, "Children, you have no fish, have you?" is an interesting one. As my wife would say, Jesus in that moment had an amazing grasp of the obvious. But you know, how often do we need someone to point out the obvious to us? That our nets are empty, despite how hard we have been trying, and that maybe it's important for us to cast the net on the other side of the boat. We are only casting the net on one side, and we never think to haul it up and throw it to the other side. We do the same things, believe the same things, fall into the same rut, live within our gated communities, theologically, personally, see things the same way and wonder why we are always coming up empty. Wonder why we're always feeling so anxious or sad or stressed or confused or empty of answers and a way out. As one person said to me this week, "And I feel so tired, and I don't know the answer." Jesus, in those moments, says to us what he says to the disciples, "Children, you have no fish, have you?" And in most contemporary language, perhaps we might say, "What's it getting you?" "Nothing. All that work, all through the night. Nothing. Empty nests." Cast your net on the other side of the boat. There is another side, another way, but 9 out of 10 times it's not the way we think it is. It's not the way that we can discover by reading another book, by going to another workshop, by getting another degree. It's another way that is revealed to us by the grace of God and by the example of the life of Jesus. Perhaps as a reaction to all the division and disagreement in the United States, this winter I found myself really needing a relief. I needed to step out of this dissension within the United States, and so I turned to the UK. And I started listening to BBC 4 Today every morning. And in that process, I became a Brexit addict. And Father Nigel, it makes me feel so much better.
The aim to please.
Every morning as I'm getting ready, I turn on that BBC 4 Today. And I think the critical thing is I hear about Brexit and I hear about the turmoil and the unwillingness to compromise and the mutual mistrust that's tearing the government apart, was summed up in the moment when Prime Minister Theresa May offered Parliament every possible option and none of it was agreed upon. Over and over again, Parliament keeps throwing its net in the same direction. And when offered every possibility for agreement, They cannot compromise, and they mistrust even talking to one another. Well, I certainly could be talking about us as well. And I hear the Lord saying from the shore, "Children, you have caught no fish. Children, what is it getting you? Throw the net to the other side of the boat." Time and time again, good people whom I love and care about come to talk with me. They're tortured with guilt, with a feeling they don't belong in church because everyone else is so good and they're so bad. I can tell you, most confessions I hear begin with how bad the person feels about herself or himself. And when that point comes, when the priest is to offer God's comfort, it's always offering God's gentleness rather than God's blame and harshness. Time and time again, I see people choosing loneliness and isolation over the promise of a loving community because they don't see themselves as lovable and therefore fitting into that community. Or they think they are heretics. 9 out of 10 of the heretics, self-identified, I've run into are quite orthodox and faithful. Or they believe they don't belong, or they're afraid they will be shamed for who they are or how they have lived. And I hear Jesus on the shore saying, "Children, you have caught no fish. Children, what is it getting you? Throw the net to the other side of the boat." Time and time again, I hear of churches that are preaching a corrupt form of the gospel that is more about Pharisaism, more about purity and separation than grace and love, welcome and inclusion. "Children, you have caught no fish," says Jesus from the shore. "Children, what is it getting you? Throw the net to the other side of the boat." Several years ago, there was a very telling book called Unchristian. Maybe some of you have read it. It explores the perceptions of those generally under 30 or 35 who avoid church like the plague. And in one interview with a young woman, we hear about her dropping into a church Bible study. She recounts, "We were talking about sex, intimacy, and pregnancy, stuff like that. I told them about a friend of mine who was considering an abortion. I told them her entire situation. A 20-year-old boyfriend left her. She's feeling really alone. I made some comment about really empathizing with my friend, that I could understand her choice, that it might make sense for her, and I guess that shocked them. I know the woman, and I know that the women around me were pro-life and all. I don't know what I am, pro-life or pro-choice or just myself, but the conversation shifted at that point in a really strange and weird way. Instead of having a dialogue, I was put on the defensive. They were nice enough about it, but the ladies just kept talking at me, trying to fix my attitude about abortion. And the woman pauses and softens her tone. And here is the part that bothered me, something I never told them. I never felt safe to tell them. What they didn't know is that I had had an abortion a long time ago. It was not an experience I would have wished on anyone, but I can feel my friend's dilemma because I lived it. I'm not sure the Christians I hung out with that morning get that. And later the writer says, I guess the truth is, I was hoping for some empathy for myself. Another outsider to the church described it like this: Christians like to hear themselves talk, They're arrogant about their beliefs, but they never bother to figure out what other people actually think. They don't seem to be very compassionate, especially when they feel strongly about something. And again, I hear Jesus saying, cast your net to the other side of the boat. What is it getting you? What is it getting you? What is on that other side of the boat, on the right side of the boat? I think this passage from the epilogue of the Gospel of John gives us a picture of what the other side of the boat is like, the one that brings full nets. However you want to talk about fullness. For the only commandment Jesus gives in the Gospel of John is not a list of thou shalt nots, not exclusivity, not what you should do or how you should live your life. The only commandment Jesus gives is the commandment to love one another in the same methodology as He has shown love to them by tenderly washing His disciples' feet. Tenderness, servanthood, grace upon grace, as John says, love upon love, love abundant enough to envelop us in all our failures and meanness, love abundant enough to envelop our enemies in all their failures and meanness. What if we took this commandment seriously enough to throw our nets in that direction, to be tender to others and tender toward ourselves, as the one who washed his disciples' feet, including that of Judas, who washed the feet of the very ones who eventually betrayed and denied him? What might change in us and in the world? What if tender love demonstrated, a word spoken in the flesh, became everything that we are about? Would not our nets be full? This is what I am most passionate about in this church, that we can continue and strive to be a place where this is not only spoken about, but enacted. And in so doing, we follow the path of John, the beloved disciple. It's what everyone hungers for, that tender love. And it is ultimately that which will transform us and through us transform others. Amen.